Okay, so in this video we're going to talk a little bit about Criterion C for the internal assessment. Criterion C is the most highly weighted and therefore the most important part of your IA, and it's really the place where you can show off the complexity and thoughtfulness of your coding. So that's really the entire goal of this. And in part D, you're going to get a chance to look back to your success criteria and show your program working and kind of show that it actually functions the way that it's meant to. But to really provide the depth, you need to use Criterion C to go through your program and really show where you have shown depth. So I'm going to look at a few different things to support our kind of work today. And you can look at the strand C. It kind of gives a brief overview, but I'm not really going to focus on it as much as I'll do Mr. B's internal assessment guide, because I think, as always, it provides a lot of depth. I'll go over kind of some of the things in here. I think that it's available for you to read, so I don't want to read it for you. But so after that, I think we'll look into some student exemplars and see kind of some high-level student exemplars and see what they're doing and see what the commentators kind of saying and how we can apply that to your own work. Okay, so we'll start with Mr. B's IA guide, where we got down on page like 14. And he's just going to break down kind of what the role of this should be. And then we should show the overall structure of our project. I've seen this, I think when we look at the exemplars, sometimes we see UML diagrams where we're showing like how the classes are set up, and sometimes we won't. So I'm not sure that that's always something that has to happen. I think sometimes that can happen more in B. But if it's helpful to kind of show the structure of your code through a UML diagram, then I think it could be justified to include it in here. I kind of have seen it both ways. I've seen it most of the time in B, I feel like, but also sometimes we see it discussed in C. So I think one key point with the Criterion C is that it typically takes, I think it's around it says here 500 to 1,000 words, but typically a lot closer to 1,000 than 500. And when we consider that there's only 2,000 words to work with, this is about half of your extended writing should be coming in Criterion C. So that should give you an idea of just the level of complexity you should put into this, the level of explanation that you should put into this versus maybe some of the other categories. And this kind of goes through some of the things you should be doing. It's really all about the complexity and the ingenuity. So the complexity is like the sophistication of the techniques that you're using, or the sophistication of the data types that you're using, for example. The ingenuity is about the algorithms and how, I guess, in my mind, I think about it as how creative and how kind of efficient your code is. So that's overall what you're trying to express through your code. And I think also you're trying to, and I think in doing that, you also need to walk through your code a little bit and kind of explain how it works. Because if you just kind of explain one piece, it's going to be really hard, I think, for the moderator to make sense of what you're doing. But if you kind of explain how your code works and kind of like a narrative, and then as you go along, you're picking out the complex parts, I think you'll have a lot better chance of success. I think another key point, just as I kind of scan back through here, the complexity of the project must be justified by the candidate in their write-up. So even though you might have some really complex stuff, they want to see that you know what you're talking about and that you can explain it. So for example, if you're importing, I guess 2 points about importing. One, make sure that you do document if you're importing things that you haven't created. I think it's, obviously we're going to import some libraries. You might want to identify what libraries you've imported and kind of what have you changed, what changes have you made. But also, the other point here is that you need to explain how something works, because that's really what's important here. I think I'm not going to go through all this, but I do think this is something good to look at. This is this teacher's guide to how to do this, but they have been doing it for a long time, so I think it's worthwhile to look through and get some ideas for what they are suggesting might give you ingenuity or complexity. I do think it's important to recognize that you couldn't possibly use all the above items. You would think about what makes sense with my project. Okay, so a couple things you should be doing. I'm going to show you an example that I think is really good. It scores 10 out of 12 points. They tend to not give full 12 points, so getting a 10 out of 12 is pretty strong for this. But let me find this example here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to lead you to it. So if we go into the exemplar, and I'm going to go to this one. Actually, I really like this. 9 out of 12, still pretty high. Click on this, and then we'll go to the development. And that's what all these million tabs are open. So this student is making actually I like this one and I do like the other one. This one got 10 points. They're pretty similar in terms of what they're trying to do. We can open up both of these. But what I like about both these examples, one, they're written in Java. They're doing things that I think we can definitely do. And I like that they kind of walk through the game. They explain what they're going to do like how the game would work. If you click this, this is what's going to happen, and here's the code that can tell you why. So they're kind of starting with a screen where we have these 3 buttons, and then it's just saying, you know, depending on when the button is clicked, it's going to decide what to do, and it kind of shows you the code that they're using. And they go into say, okay, if you click this, here's what's going to happen. We're going to create a new teacher object. And I like that they are kind of taking you from the very beginning of their code, and they're walking through like what's going to happen when you click different buttons. And as they go through here, they're getting a chance to show their code. And I feel like, so, you know, if we look through here though, you can see it sometimes. I feel like they are saying that they're using something, like when teacher presses any of them, a random access file will be open for reading and writing. But they don't really explain. I think, you know, if we look at the commentators on this, what they're going to say is that it's not going to show enough kind of explanation. I think is typically what they say. Lots, you know, complexity is high, lots of visual evidence, but most of them have only been explained in a superficial manner. So I feel like sometimes here, like maybe this could be a chance where they could explain what this is, why it's working, why it's like why it's a good thing to use, instead of just saying, here, I'm using this. Why are they using this? Why is this a good choice? But again, they're kind of just walking through their code. They're saying, you know, I feel like they're kind of walking step by step, and as they walk through their code, they're giving a chance to explain what's happening, like what's the sophistication in their code. I know that there are, they say don't tell the entire life of your, you don't have to tell every single thing about your code. So I think it's a balance between giving the like a tour of your code, but not showing every single last thing. So I think that might be a balance that we have to strike here. And so I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but I think we can kind of hopefully get a chance to look through this and see kind of what they are, what choices they're making here. You know, and like another, so this is one that popped out to me earlier when I was looking at this. You know, they say I used a linear search algorithm here. Like, that's fine, but again, I can't read the moderator's minds, but I'm wondering if they're thinking here, like, okay, well, why did this person choose a linear search algorithm? You know, there's a lot of algorithms you could choose. Why did this one make sense? So I feel like that might be a chance where they could show a little bit more depth of, like, that they really understand this well. Like, why does that make sense instead of doing a binary or something else? You know, the list isn't sorted, so therefore I'm going to use a linear search algorithm. Something like that. So I don't want to go through, I think this video is already long enough, but it is, you know, the most heavily weighted category, so I did want to spend some time on it. I think you could also see in here, well, actually, you know, throughout they are showing examples from their GUI. I've heard different things about this. I've heard that you should never show from your, I haven't heard any official word, but from other teachers I've heard that you should never show the actual product, like from your game, because this should be done, well, maybe not, maybe I'm thinking a little bit wrong. This could be, actually, you know, I think it's fine to show the actual screenshots. I was thinking maybe for Criterion B. But do include screenshots from your code to, or screenshots from your GUI or whatever your visual is to help you kind of explain your code.